Yes, can you see me?
I can see you, Caddy. Where are you?
I'm up in Mille Lacs.
Nice. I saw Colin's post this morning. Well,
Okay,
RCA, he did some nice social distancing there.
well,
That's fantastic.
yeah, it's going well. Julie
Yeah,
is on tap right now, so I get to walk away and do this, which is great.
nice. Good.
Yeah. Nice to see you, my friend.
You too. You too. And as people are joining, feel free to type into the chat where you're tuning in from. And it is 10:02. So Cameron, I think we're just going to go ahead and get started so that the folks here, we honor their time for arriving on time. And I know we always have a packed schedule. So I just want to be sure that we get through everything.
Sounds good to me.
And so Cindy, do you want to do the opening or should I?
I would love you to do it, Chris.
Okay. All right. So welcome to our fourth session of the Volunteer Management Learning Collaborative. We are talking about recruiting volunteers today. The slide you see before you is a structure of the Peer Recovery Center of Excellence. So this session is brought to you by the Recovery Community Organization Capacity Building Team and out of the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Go to the next slide. So if we want addiction destigmatized, we need a language that's unified. The words we use matter. Caution needs to be taken, especially when disorders concerned are heavily stigmatized, such as substance use disorder. So throughout the presentation, if we have comments and we unmute ourselves, just be sure that we're using non-stigmatizing language, person first, we're people first, and we're not our disease or our diagnosis. And then a little bit of housekeeping. So we love to see faces. So if it's possible, have your camera on. I realize a lot of us are working from home and that may not be possible, and that's okay. But if you do have that opportunity, we'd love to see your faces. We are recording today's event and it will be posted and made publicly available for 1 year post this time. While you're not speaking, please do keep your line muted. And we're going to use the chat feature throughout today's training. So feel free, like I said earlier, type in where you're from. If you want to share what your role is into the chat, and then you can use that to communicate with either Cindy and I about any tech issues or Cameron and Wendy about comments about the training. And I think this is where I hand it over to Cameron. Thanks, Cameron.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I suppose I'm joining you as far as the structure of this goes. My name is Cameron Kruger. I'm the president and CEO of the Duluth Children's Museum here in Duluth, Minnesota. I've been a trainer with MAVA for a really long time, something like 16 years now. And it's been a great opportunity for me to hone my skills as a volunteer manager over the course of my career. And I've really enjoyed the ability to be able to share my experiences with folks using this really in-depth methodology. So hopefully you've had some great modules already and you're all kind of primed for thinking about how we're going to be recruiting volunteers into the positions that we have thought about over the course of the few modules that you've already taken here. Please throw questions into the chat box, and I'm going to give lots of time for discussion and small group discussions. So I'm excited to hear your insights. And speaking of which, let's get ourselves warmed up this morning. I'm going to break you into groups of 3 for 5 minutes here. And what I'd like you to do is talk about a time that you said yes when you were recruited as a volunteer. How were you asked to volunteer? So in what method were you asked? And why did you say yes? What was important about that volunteer position to you? So 5 minutes, groups of 3. We'll have a little bit of a discussion here. Thanks, Wendy.
Teresa just joined or will be
Hi,
joining.
Teresa. Thanks for joining us. We just went into our first breakout rooms. I'll go ahead and
Okay.
put those questions in the chat box so that you can see what we're talking about. And I'll go ahead and put you into one right now.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to go ahead off camera for a while if you guys don't mind. I'm
Sounds
trying
good,
to
Cindy.
sort of multitask,
That is fair.
being alert.
Wendy, I like this size of small group, so I won't specify anymore. If we can just do them in these 3 rooms, this is perfect.
That sounds great.
Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had some good opening discussions here. Would anyone want to share with the group an insight that you had from your discussion, or a particular way that you were recruited as a volunteer, just as an example here? Yeah, Deborah.
Hello, this is Deborah from Northern Illinois Recovery Community Organization. I was sharing with the group that my first real volunteer experience was with church, with our ladies department, and anything related to church, I felt like I was voluntold, not necessarily volunteered. And when it comes from, the pastor's wife, you kind of feel obligated to say yes. I mean, 10 years later, I'm thankful for the opportunity, but at first it kind of scared me because I didn't really feel like I had a choice in the back. But that was my first real experience. And saying yes was just easy because, again, you just felt like you had to.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think a lot of us, our first volunteer roles were in religious circumstances. That's pretty common in our society, that we're part of an institution and a community, and we get roped into all of the trappings of what that means. And hopefully that builds a great foundation and good experiences for people. Not always, but certainly a way that a lot of us get into volunteering. Who else has a good example here?
I can share. This is Caddy. I was telling my group that Deborah was part of that I moved into a neighborhood in South Minneapolis and joined or went to just one of our Lindale Neighborhood Association meetings just to kind of find out what it was about. And they were having their annual fall fundraiser. And in just the discussion, my skill set was like, oh, hi, Caddy, would you like to help join us? Because it sounds like you could do something really helpful. And I was like, sure. So sometimes when you let the information out of the gate, people will walk right into it. I had no, I wasn't in any way not going to volunteer if they asked me, but it was an awesome experience. And again, I shared with the group that we have a really successful neighborhood association because of our fundraiser. So I feel like I can take a little bit of pride for the years that I've been involved, but it's been just an awesome experience. So out of the gate, it's probably one of the first real volunteer things I've ever done. And I feel pretty good about it. Thanks.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, Caddy. It makes me think of two things. One is, boy, do we need to set up our volunteer recruiters the way that volunteer recruiter was ready to pounce when they knew that you had the skill set they were looking for. We all need to be ready for that. The other is, from the volunteer's perspective, I always say, if you're looking to build relationships in a new community, or you are looking for a career change, there's nothing like volunteering your time to build those relationships and meet people and, get to know the neighborhood that you're in order to, get yourself settled. And so I see that as a great recruitment message for the right person to say, here's your opportunity to practice the skills that you need or to meet the people you'd like to. So Mike says, don't come near me. The recruiting game is strong. I love that. Part of what we're going to be talking about today is how our sales pitches, what our ability to be able to sell what it is that we're trying to get people to do is in their volunteer positions. How do we convey the right kind of message to the right kind of person so that they're saying yes when it comes time to recruit them for the positions that we need filled? That's really what today's whole topic is going to be. So again, restating that a little differently here, volunteer recruitment is a process to attract and invite people to consider involvement in your organization. This is often about a first touch point to volunteerism. Maybe not the first touch point with this person. Certainly the people who are going to be most apt to join as a volunteer in your organization have some skin in the game, are going to have, either feel really passionate about your mission or are connected to your organization in some way, or very likely you have some kind of relationship with them that you are leveraging in order to recruit them as volunteers. A lot of volunteers are recruited that way, that we know somebody and we've worked our relationship together so that they feel comfortable when I say, hey, I need somebody to do this. Would you be willing to do that? And they say, well, I trust Cam, so I'm going to come on in and volunteer to do that. You have already established in the earlier modules some of those key pieces that are going to make recruitment easier. Creating a position that is going to be fulfilling to volunteers. And then what you'll need to do is have an interview and screening process that allows you to make a match between that volunteer and the type of position that you think is going to be the best fit, or that you mutually are going to think is the best fit at the end of the day. Exception to that would be short-term, low-skill activities, areas where you're not needing to put a lot of your effort into matching specific skills with specific types of opportunities. The other piece of this is doing your homework ahead of time. And making sure that you are thinking back to that module on designing position descriptions and those volunteer opportunities, and designing them in such a way that they're going to be ready and welcoming for the kind of volunteer that you're trying to recruit. It's really important to put the work in on the forefront, so when you get to the recruitment phase, you've got something that's really packageable and marketable and sellable to the volunteers that you're trying to recruit. Now, some things that I feel are the most important parts of this as we establish our thought process about recruitment. Number one way to get volunteers in the door, personal ask. The idea of going up to somebody and saying, I think you would be a great fit for our organization, is the strongest kind of message that you can send to your volunteers. And among those that are asked by somebody, 50% are asked by a friend, just like I was alluding to. I know Cam, I trust him, and he asked me to do something. So statistically, I'm more willing to take advantage of this opportunity than if it was just a cold call to somebody that had that skill set. And again, thinking about the idea of religion as part of volunteerism, 56% learned of their volunteer opportunities through their place of worship. And so here comes my first tip of the day here, and that's, as an organization, building relationships with religious entities in your community is a great way to recruit for volunteers. In many of my past positions, I've sent an email to the pastor and said, hey, can you put a note in your bulletin that just says we've got some opportunities for volunteer recruitment? And when you have the relationship there, it's pretty well guaranteed that they're willing to do that and broadcast that you have volunteer opportunities available. In addition to actually volunteering within that area of worship. As outside organizations, we have the opportunity to advertise essentially to these other organizations. So that is a great way to do that. Any thoughts or questions about these revealing statistics that I imagine are not that surprising to folks? Great. So how do we position ourselves to be the most readily available to volunteer recruitment? Now, this is the overview of a lot of the key concepts we're going to be talking about in this. But what recruitment is and its impact, barriers to volunteers and how to overcome those so that you're most likely to be able to get volunteers in. How to design an effective recruitment message, that sales pitch that we were just talking about. What does it take to be an effective recruiter? And I'll be interested in Mike's insights here on what skills he feels he has that convinces people to take on these positions. And what tools strengthen your recruitment abilities? What are the things that you need in order to be the most successful recruiter? What this module is really going to uncover at the end of the day is that connection between recruiting the right people into the right positions. So, very first thing, identifying and addressing people's possible resistance to volunteering within your organization. there are lots of ways that people don't want to volunteer for you. And so we need to be establishing some idea of what are those potential barriers and what sorts of things are going to prevent people from wanting to be a part of our organization. So I'd love for you to take a couple of minutes here. I think we're going to go 6 minutes. And I'd love for you to discuss two things, which is what personal barriers do you think people have where they might not respond positively to your opportunities? And how might you address barriers? What could your organization do to be able to get through that barrier? So one example that I have is, time is the number one thing that people say is a barrier to their ability to serve. And so what we at the Duluth Children's Museum have done is create more one and done opportunities, a chance for folks to be able to come in, try it out, and if that's it and they're done, that's great. But often I've got a thread there now that I can pull on later on for more long-term volunteer opportunities. So folks can spend a few minutes here talking about that, and then we'll debrief after your discussion.
Hi, Cynthia. Everybody is just in breakout groups right now to talk about this discussion question. And I'll go ahead and repost it so you can see it. And I'll put you into one of the breakout rooms.
Welcome back, everyone. So let's do a little bit of sharing from our group sessions here. And I've pulled up a flip chart so that we can record some of your thoughts. What were some of the barriers that you have identified in those groups? Just go ahead and call them out to me.
Yeah, I'd like to say something about that. My name is Mike Tyson. I'm the founder and director of Take Action Today in Southern Illinois. Something that I spoke about a little bit in our section a while ago, but one of the biggest barrier that we face as an organization right now is that we are in a region that has a very low minority population. So recruiting volunteers from a minority population has been very difficult for us, in which our whole organization is volunteers. So we've had a lot of difficulty trying to recruit board members, peers and stuff. And these are areas that we want to do, but we have not figured out how to overcome that barrier yet.
And so a value that your organization has is to have more diversity amongst your volunteer base. And so bringing people, BIPOC folks into your volunteer base is going to be important to you. That's what I'm hearing there?
Absolutely.
Great. Any thoughts on how to overcome that? I also live in a place that is 86% white, and this is a conversation that we have on a regular basis, is how to be more inclusive and how to bring equity and justice into our organizations. And I'd love to know, are there any thoughts on how to overcome that kind of a barrier?
I'll jump in. I think my old executive director used to call it like putting in front porch time. So spending time, like we actually had to go out and volunteer and show up for events in those communities. And so to show support through our organization by showing up and giving our time. So again, kind of like we were taking that first step and saying, we want to support your work. And oftentimes it did result in members of their organization and their community showing up for our work.
Thank you, Chris. I think that sums up my thoughts exactly. Hey, regardless of who you're trying to attract to these volunteer opportunities, it's about relationship building. And so when we build relationships with people, that's going to be their target audience for who is going to come in. And so if we rely solely on our really small box of network that we have in relationships, our close friend group, you might not be getting the kind of diversity that you would want in your organization. So you're going to have to, I love that putting in front porch time. I'm stealing that entirely. That's a lovely way to put that, because that's really what it's about. Getting out and being a part of your community is the best way to engage your community. What other barriers?
The one thing that I had mentioned is that a lot of our volunteers lately have been wanting to know that their time is going to translate into a paid position.
Boy, that's tough. Any overcoming that kind of a barrier ideas?
I don't know that I have an overcoming that, but mine sort of follows a similar track. And that is, I think one of the things we could do better that might fall in the line with that is making sure that when we get volunteers in, we're utilizing the skills that they want to use. We can fill chairs and we can have them do tasks, but what is it that they want to do? And so I think it's upon us to be a little bit more inquisitive with the volunteers that are coming to us. They want to give us their time, but what do they want to do with their time? It's just a constant thing now with this class that we're taking, and that is trying to find out what they want to learn so that maybe they get something from the organization they volunteer for, and that does transfer then to a potential job opportunity. So it's kind of a twofold. One, they're doing something that they want to do where they want to learn, and then maybe it goes off to another job opportunity. So that's what I see as one of the barriers, or just one of the things we could do a whole lot better.
That's fantastic. I mean, honestly, that can be part of your sales pitch. One, I mean, I think about this as we need to be extremely clear with volunteers what their expectations should be. Are there paid positions within your organization or not that volunteers can move into? And if there are, that's fantastic. But I know I don't usually have those because we're a very small staff. So it's going to be more of, what kind of skills are you looking to learn so that you can translate this volunteer opportunity into something marketable for the kind of job that you're looking for? And how can we utilize our network of connections to help you find that position you're looking for while you're volunteering? So, I think we can spin this a little bit and still make our volunteer positions seem extremely enticing while not promising anybody anything, because we just don't have those paid positions to fill people with.
So we have linked up with our local workforce, so we can actually get them into like a paid internship with this. And it may not lead to a position with us, but maybe somewhere else in the community, and they learn skills that they can take with them.
I love that. That made me think a little tangentially too, that one thing that we do in the recruitment world for my organization is we will often have somebody who's not a great fit for our organization. And so using a network like Workforce Center and our volunteer centers locally to say, we're not a great fit for you, but here's some other resources to be able to drive you to, can maintain a relationship without a hard no of, sorry, we work with kids here and you have a criminal history. That's not going to be a really great fit, sort of thing. So Jasmine, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, so we stipend. Oh, I'm Jasmine Andrade. I'm the outreach coordinator at Stairway to Recovery. So we have volunteers, and then we also give them stipends. And I think that one of the difficulties that we face is consistency, like staying motivated to continue to keep doing it. We'll have peers that are really excited and they're like doing everything in the beginning, and then like after one or two checks, and then they kind of like fall off and don't really want to come anymore. They just show up to say that they showed up to get the check, but don't really. So that's like something that I'm struggling with. So I liked that someone had brought up, asked them what they like to do and see what their interests are, so we can see what they can bring to the table, because maybe the positions that I'm giving them aren't a fit for them. So that's what I wanted to add.
Yeah, that's a tough one too, because I would say most volunteer positions don't have a stipend, aside from, an AmeriCorps position probably would be the best example of a stipended volunteer position. So what most of us have in our volunteer design is we're relying on the intrinsic motivation of volunteers, or that they're trying to build skills. So in your case, absolutely. I mean, I just think about it like any job, any paid position within our organization. How do we make sure that we're finding the right candidates for the right kind of positions so that they feel like they are doing really, really good work and they feel motivated to show up every day? That can be hard. Sometimes we're working with a limited workforce and we've got to work with the people that are interested in the position we have available. And so I could see both, trying some new things to motivate folks, and then also having to sort of design your organization around the potential loss or high turnover of folks just by the nature of the kind of position that you have. So I want to honor the fact that you are probably not doing anything wrong, but there are some things you can try there, and there's some opportunities, I think, to motivate, while also understanding who you're working with, and who's drawn to a position like that. Are there any thoughts from anyone else about Jasmine's quandary here? Let's do one more barrier. Who else has a good barrier? Laura.
The other thing that came up in our group was kind of the administrative work. So like from the perspective of an organization, like who better to do kind of the busy work of, filing and that sort of stuff than a volunteer. But what volunteer is coming to your organization because they're passionate about filing and paperwork?
Any thoughts on overcoming that?
I think that's the,
Oh, go ahead, Ellen.
sorry. I think that's another one where you just need to really get to know the people, because I have run into those people that perhaps they just want to come in and use the paper shredder and they will shred for 2 hours and go home. It's just a matter of really finding out what people are interested in doing.
I was gonna say that same thing, Ellen, is that I think there's times we have like what we call skilled volunteers. I mean, every volunteer is skilled, but it's actually like really pleasing for them to have this really focused task. It has a starting point, an end point, and it's just kind of easy on the brain, and they can just come in and do the work. And sometimes even doing that for ourselves. So maybe, once you have a structured program, there's only, when you're 6 hours into your day, even as a staff person, sometimes like you just need a brain reset, and shredding some paper might feel lovely. And you can have skilled volunteers doing other tasks that kind of keep the minutia going. So yeah, I just think it's about being upfront and finding that fit and making that match.
Absolutely. I will give the example, we work with volunteers a lot, and, or I'm sorry, with interns a lot is what I meant to say. And we have unpaid internship positions primarily. And so there's always a balance between, I have very boring data entry tasks that need to be done. But I also know that there are skills that you need to get out of this internship. And so if you can get my boring data entry task done, I also have this really interesting, curating a doll exhibit with me sort of opportunity that makes it more motivating to get through the less interesting tasks that we might have in our organizations. So I think some of that balance can be really appealing too. Well, thank you everybody for sharing those thoughts and perspectives. I'm going to go back to our slideshow here. All right. Key concept number 2. For volunteer recruitment to be successful, the needs of the organization and the needs of the volunteer must be simultaneously met. And I think we started to edge into that as we talked about those barriers. But now I'd love to talk as a group, specifically this question. What happens if a volunteer's needs are met, but the organization's aren't? What do you think the reaction from your organization would be if that were the case? And I would think specifically about how staff might react if the volunteers' needs were being met, but the organizations weren't. Any thoughts?
Cam, it looks like there's a comment in the chat box, stressed out staff.
Absolutely. So when you're meeting volunteer needs and your organization's needs aren't being met, your staff are going to be stressed out because staff now are placating to the volunteers without any help, without any needs being addressed that are going to allow staff to be able to concentrate on other parts of their work. What else?
Another one says frustration, unsatisfied.
Perfect. And what that ends up resulting in is a staff that feels like volunteers aren't a worthwhile investment for your organization. And we do have to look at volunteers as an investment. They take resources, time being the primary one. And so if staff are not feeling like there's going to be a return on that investment, which you'll talk about a lot in a later module here, then you are not going to be able to convince them to continue working with volunteers, and there's going to be some resentment there. I had a director on my team who did a lot of physical work, a lot of building of exhibits, and there was a logical connection to bringing volunteers in. But he, in past organizations, had been burned over and over again with volunteers not showing up to commitments and, it taking a lot of work to instruct them. And so when he got to my organization, it was like pulling teeth to convince him that having volunteers was going to be a worthwhile part of his work. And it meant, at the end of the day, me micromanaging getting volunteers in there and getting them, showing this director that there was an opportunity to utilize these volunteers in a way that was going to be meaningful. But I never did get over the hump of being able to show this director that those volunteers were going to be meaningful, because in past organizations, their positions were not designed in a way that were going to be functional for him and useful to the organization. And that's a really hard mountain to climb when staff are not seeing the value of those volunteers. Now let's talk about the opposite. No, go back. How about the organization's needs are met, but the volunteers' needs are not?
A couple of other comments had come through when you were talking a bit earlier, Cam. There was low motivation and then leaving on both sides, and talk about a rotating door.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that sums it up, Cynthia, is boy, you know that people are not going to stick around if their needs are not being met. And that's the number one thing, is that a volunteer needs to feel like, and again, needs being met is so different with volunteers many times than it is with staff, because there's intrinsic motivation to be there. I'm committed to your organization because I love working with kids and I'm willing to do this without pay. All I need from you is blank. And that all I need from you is often social time, or, I love reading stories. And so I'm willing to do other things for your organization, but I just need to have story time so that I, can get that need fulfilled. If you're not meeting those needs, you are not only losing that volunteer, but as Laura says, you are risking building a bad reputation in the community. You certainly, especially those of us that are living in small communities, you can very quickly become branded with well, that's not a very fun place to be a volunteer. And when I walked into the Duluth Children's Museum 6 years ago, that's precisely the reputation that my organization had, that staff were disinterested in the organization, and therefore volunteering there was not a very fun experience, despite how fun a children's museum should be. So you can certainly burn a whole community. And again, once you've burned, it's a big mountain to climb. So setting these things up right from the forefront and being thoughtful about it right now is going to be the way for you to be the most successful at the end of the day. So let's move into some actual recruitment techniques, some ways to get people in the door. And I'd love to start with what not to do. So there are a couple of techniques that you will see folks use that is not going to be long-term successful for your organization. The bait and switch, you have created a certain kind of opportunity. You posted your position description on the Volunteer Center. Volunteer comes in and has an expectation of what the volunteer position is going to look like. And they're actually going to be doing all administrative tasks all day long. And that was not what had been told to them as they were being recruited. So what do we think that does to volunteers? My cat is responding behind me here. She has thoughts. Any thoughts on what bait and switch might do for a volunteer? Yeah, lack of integrity. I think that really sums it up. Losing the trust of the volunteer and making them upset and disappointed. I think you're going to find that's a theme with a lot of these techniques. So I'll run through the next few here. There's nothing to it. Hey, this volunteer position is easy. All you have to do is read to kids. Well, boy, isn't that disenfranchising when it's like, well, I don't feel very special. Anybody could come in here and do this dang thing. We're desperate. Anyone will do, I think, sends that same message. You know, all I need is a warm body here. Just come on in. You don't need to be good at anything. Just come and do this thing. As I continue to advance in my nonprofit career, this is starting to happen to me more, which is you're a nonprofit professional, or you're a CPA, or you're a lawyer. You're exactly the kind of person I need on this volunteer task or on my board. Well, I don't know that that's necessarily the case, because I'm not invested in your organization, and I don't, know what your mission is or why I would be committed to this. And so just because I have a certain skill set doesn't mean that I'm the right fit for your organization. And also, here's a list of 10 other nonprofit professionals that, like there are lots of us out there. There's plenty of people to draw from. Doesn't make me feel particularly special that's the reason why I'm being recruited for this. We have lots of needs. Help. How many of your organizations are in a boat of desperate need right now? We need people in the door. Please, please, please. I can't get enough volunteers. And what that means is that we're not being specific, and we're sending a message that we're extremely desperate, which is not very enticing for volunteers. But B, we have so many needs, we're not necessarily matching volunteers with the things that are going to be the most specific to meet their needs and the most specific to meet our needs. It's just, come on in, there's 3 million things to do. And finally, I'm tired of doing it. Does anybody else want to do it? And I keep thinking back to that administrative task conversation of, you know what? I've been shredding for 3 days now. Let's get a volunteer in here to do this. I don't want to do this anymore. Is not a very thoughtful way to design a volunteer position. Any thoughts on those techniques to avoid, or ones you'd want to add? It is allergy season, and I am starting to get congested here. I can feel it. Just so I'm sorry if I start getting snorky here. All right. Well, it sounds like we've covered that pretty thoroughly. Now, this circles back to a conversation we were having a little bit earlier, and I just want to have it a little more specifically, because it's a really important part of how we're being thoughtful about equity and justice in our organizations, and how we are making sure that we're thoughtfully connecting with marginalized communities. So what I will say is relationship building and trust building, again, is the #1 part of our roles as volunteer recruiters. It's going to mean making sure that we're finding the best fits for the types of positions we want. But if we're really thinking holistically, it's about building relationships so that we can find the right kinds of people for these jobs, these positions. And I will tell you that the shotgun approach doesn't work in a general sense. Like if we're just throwing it out to the community, you're not going to get a lot of success, I think, finding those right fits. And it can be especially egregious and come from a very white supremacist culture if we're shotgun approaching into BIPOC communities and saying, I want somebody of color in here, is just not going to send the right kind of message for your organization. It's going to be more about the fact that we want to honor diversity in our organization and we want to build the most just and equitable organization we can. And so we're working on building relationships, and we're getting out on those front porches, as Chris had said, in order to ensure that we are hearing from a community and learning about what our organization can do to provide the best volunteer opportunities possible. The second part of this is, our organizations often are working with people who are experiencing poverty. That's a part of my life story too, is being impoverished. And the thing that is really important for us to understand is that it's not just about how we serve, like how we as an organization and give and give and give, and we don't ever ask somebody impoverished to come and volunteer for us or to be part of our board or to voice their opinion because, the feeling is they're in need. And so, there's no reason why they'd be able to help us. That is absolutely not true at all. Somebody who is in poverty may be looking for an opportunity to volunteer in a way that's going to build some skills that would be helpful to them, to build relationships, to build a community. And the other thing is that most people do volunteer in one way, shape, or form. And it might be more informal, and it might be communities of people helping each other because they have those relationships. The thing that happens that is really challenging for organizations is that volunteer can be a pretty loaded term. And it can be a pretty white saviorist term. And so we really have to be thoughtful about how we're breaking down those barriers through relationships and talking less about a volunteer opportunity and more about, here's some cool things that we can do in our organization. Would you want to, now that I've built a relationship with you, come and be a part of this with me? And here's some benefits of this. And, here's some things I know about you that can connect to the mission of our organization that we would love to draw on. So, there's work to be done in all aspects of our organizations, but when we're talking about how to bring an equity and justice lens into volunteerism, these are some real key components of that. So I'd love to sit with that for a minute. I know I am a white man saying these things out loud, so I'd love more perspectives on this and say, does this resonate? Are there some things you'd love to correct about this, or ways that we can do this better? I'd love to hear from you.
So this is Caddy. I had an experience with a young woman who is part of the African American community and is experiencing some poverty issues. And I think she felt that she didn't sort of belong. And in fact, I took the time to just sit down and chat with her I think we just talked for like 45 minutes about why she was there, what she was doing, how can we support her, thanking her for coming in and giving her the opportunity. And then she just divulged some real personal information about where she had some real deficits, and they were educational. And I think what happened in that relationship is that she began to trust us a little bit more. And then some of the services that we offered at Minnesota Recovery Connection became services that she took part in, as well as being a volunteer for us. And I really just saw her like sit up a little bit stronger and sit up a little bit more proudly, and sort of own the fact that she has some deficiencies with her education. And we just talked about what are the opportunities that she could help herself with, and maybe what we could do. And it turned out to be this awesome conversation, and her enlightening about herself, and it's okay to be you, and we accept you for who you are, and we'll take you and try to meet you where you're at and give you opportunities. But and I know that just helped her growth, and it helped my personal growth too, because when we just have those conversations, and I know she was scared at one point, and now she's not scared any longer. And it was just really it's just a story I wanted to share, because it was just a great interaction in terms of how just that communication with a volunteer and finding out who they are, what they are, where they're at, just benefits everybody in that scenario. So just want to share that.
I love that, Caddy, because the key component of that was you took the time to build a relationship, and it would not have been possible to have that kind of a hard conversation where we're talking about pride, people's pride in some aspects here, where it can be hard to share, like I have some deficits in my world. You only get to that if you can build trust and relationship. Any other thoughts? Okay, get to know the communities you serve. I don't think I have to tell you that because you are all doing really good work, but sometimes we forget because we've got a lot of work to do that that relationship building is beneficial in many, many aspects of our organization, not just in volunteer recruitment. All right. So all of this leads to a tool that you have in your handouts. It's page 5, the recruitment strategy worksheet. And what we know based on experience and research is the best strategy for getting the right volunteers is to take all the things we just talked about and put a sheen of marketing strategy on top of it, so that we are, again, as I said at the beginning, getting the best sales pitch and being able to create the best kind of concept and brand possible to be able to entice people into these positions, so that we're making people realize that this is something really cool to do and we want you to be a part of this. So what I'd love for you to do is take 3 or so minutes here, just some silent, sustained writing time. And I'd love for you to just jot down a few notes into that recruitment strategy worksheet. Or if you have it digitally, just kind of give it some thought. Some of the things that we have started to talk about here, how do they fit into that recruitment worksheet? And some of the areas of that are how we design our position description, what kind of skills we need, what's the type of person based on qualities that you would want to recruit, what's the best source to find these kinds of volunteers, what's the best technique to reach them, what are the benefits of your volunteer position, and who's the best person to do the recruiting for that kind of position. So take a couple minutes here and see what you can jot down about that. All right, hopefully you've had a little bit of time here to jot down a few notes. I would encourage you to work on this in between now and our next module. as it really helps you coalesce some of the thoughts we have today and get them on paper, which I think sets you up the best for using this information in a tangible way. Any questions about that recruitment worksheet? All right.
Can I just say one thing real quick?
Yes, please.
You know, I look at this, we are in this now we're heading towards post-COVID world. And I look at all of this and we deal with the best recruitment strategy that we've done is our outreach from our RCO. And we had great volunteers who love to do outreach, and then they all got stifled because of COVID. So now it's really, we're having to rebuild that volunteer pool that love to do these jobs. And I'm just sitting here looking at all these and going, oh, we got to rebuild. All of us are probably feeling that because people have just gone into the woodwork because that's where everybody had to go. So it's just really interesting how complicated it is right now, because I'm sure, I shouldn't say we all, but I know we have to rebuild this pool, and it just makes me sad and excited all at the same time.
Yeah. Our organization is looking at it as an opportunity to rebuild from scratch. Minnesota Association of Volunteer Administrators has a service enterprise long-term training program that our organization was lucky to go through. Where we received some certification and built some systems. It's really hard to build the plane while you're flying it. And so having kind of a reset from the pandemic has allowed us to say, okay, we can't have volunteers. Our organization's only been open 4 out of the last 14 months or 6 out of the last 14 months. So, we have had lots of downtime to think about how do we best implement these strategies. It's the worst when we have organizations that will never get a really good volunteer back because they're just gone now, like the time has passed and they've moved on to other things or life has changed. But in a positive way, it gives our organizations a chance to reset a little bit and build some new systems in. So yeah, like everything else about what we've gone through in the last year, it's pros and cons, and mostly cons, unfortunately, but there's some advantages I think that we can build in our organization. So key concept number 3 is recruitment invitation. And there are 4 elements that I want you to think about as you think about what that invitation to volunteer might look like. The first is a statement of need. And that's not what the organization needs, but rather what the need of your clients are. What is it that your organization does to serve the folks who you work with, or the cats that you work with, or the whatever your organization does. And how do we portray that to the volunteers? Because that's at the end of the day the nut that we're trying to achieve in our volunteer work. Yes, it might seem like you're shredding confidential papers, and that's the job that you're doing, but that frees up our program manager to be able to work on this thing, which then serves our client in this way. So you are directly benefiting the organization's ability to serve the client, is what we are trying to pitch to our volunteers. And it's honesty. That's what volunteer work does. It helps us better serve our clients. How specifically can the volunteer help? So what exactly can they do that is going to allow them to want to take on this position? And the way you're going to want to frame that is you can help by blank. You can help our clients in need by doing this specific activity. What are the benefits to the volunteer? So what examples can we think of within the organization that will be benefits? So the connections, the relationships, the skill building, all the things that we talked about earlier, so that they're not just helping the organization, but they are helping themselves as well. Some of that might be too, as I said earlier, that we are being specific about the I know that you want to do this kind of thing. And so the benefit is that you're getting to do this kind of thing. So I love story time. And so we're giving you the opportunity to do story time. Might be the benefit. And so just kind of think holistically about what that benefit to your volunteer might look like. And then the final piece of that is how will this volunteer position contribute to the organization's mission? And so that then goes back to that sort of bigger picture, the 10,000 foot view of how does all this roll up to the benefit to the whole community, and the fact that there's a bigger picture to everything that they're doing with the bit of volunteer work that they are contributing to the organization. Questions about those 4 parts of the recruitment message? So for example, Special Olympics needs softball coaches for spring league. That's the need of the organization. Internally, that's how we think about it. Hey guys, we are starting softball up again post-pandemic here. We're starting fresh. We don't have any coaches lined up. We really need some people for spring league. That's how we're talking about it internally. When we're talking about our recruitment message, let me put on my advertising voice here. They have gloves, bats, and softballs, but no coach. 75 boys and girls with special needs are waiting for a coach. Don't let them strike out. Join our Special Olympics team. Call 1-800-GOLD today. 2 very, very different ways of thinking about how we recruit volunteers, right? If your flyer says softball coach is needed for spring league, here's the phone number. Yeah, I mean, that's, if you get somebody who's like, oh, I love doing softball coaching, of course, yeah, totally going to call that number. But anybody who maybe is on the fence about that, or not really understanding that, there's lots of different people that can be softball coaches, maybe aren't going to have their heartstrings pulled by that kind of a message. So how we think about what's going to really entice somebody with honesty and with an eye for what the work is actually going to do, the more likely you are to draw somebody in. So here's what I would like you to do. I am going to give you a few minutes here to come up with a statement for your organization. And I want you to start with, just like we had, what's your organizational need? And then how do we frame it in a way that states the need, states how the volunteer is going to help, what's the benefit to the volunteer, and what's the impact of the position? And you'll notice that those things in this really short paragraph are pretty rolled in together. Not all those need one sentence to say it, but we want to be thinking about it. 75 boys and girls with special needs are waiting for a coach. Okay, so that's our statement of need. Don't let them strike out is also our statement of need, but then rolls more into that's going to be the impact of the position. So there's lots of ways to think about this language, and I don't want you to get too tripped up by answering all 4 of the questions with a sentence. I just want you to think our overall pitch is going to fill these 4 needs. So I'm going to give you 4 minutes to do that, and then we're going to do some small group refinement here. So start with that. And feel free to throw any questions you have about this process in the chat, or just jump on if you'd like. All right, well, you have another minute here to continue writing those. I'm going to explain the next part of this exercise. So we're going to break you up into groups again here. And with about groups of 4, you're going to have about 2 minutes per person. I want you to share the statement that you have drafted. And then I'd like you to take a little bit of time as a group to refine that statement and to talk a little bit about what could be included or excluded or thoughts that you have about that heartstring pulling. So we'll spend about 8 minutes as a group. Please try to keep track of the time there so that everyone gets about 2 minutes to be able to share and have some refinement of their statement. We'll send you off.
I'm just gonna step away for a couple minutes, Kim.
No problem. This is the longer one. Get out of here. Welcome back again, everybody. Hope you had some productive conversations on your recruitment messages. And I'd love if there were any volunteers who could share what you came up with.
I can share. This is Deborah Lewis from NERCO. Let me read it. Northern Illinois Recovery Community Organization is looking for persons with lived experience to help spread the word of recovery and reduce the stigma in Lake County. We need recovery ambassadors to facilitate group discussions and recovery education series. This opportunity will allow you to give back to your community and serve as a testament that recovery is possible.
Oh, I love how strong you end that there. Recovery is possible, and people need to know that. Thank you, Deborah. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Anyone else would like to share?
I can share mine since I got good feedback from my group. So we have a clothing donation closet that our peers can access. So it's just based around that one opportunity. So Caring Closet in need a volunteer to maintain and organize inventory so that peers can shop comfortably and easily access items that will help them feel confident and fashionable. Volunteer will organize the closet and assist peers in finding items. Volunteer will build skills in fashion and retail management, and most importantly, empower peers to look and feel their best in their recoveries.
Awesome. I love that. That says everything it needs to. The only thing I would add, Laura, as you think about publicizing this, is replacing the word volunteer with you. Just directing it specifically at your target audience. You will be able to, do these things.
Got it.
I'll share.
Yes,
Hi,
thank you.
I'm Christy from Thriving United. And here at Thriving United, we also, we have a lot of people that need help moving, especially whenever they get out of rehab and stuff like that. They're trying to get their belongings and stuff. And so that's what mine's based out of. Rocking and rolling, let's get going. Helpful hands needed to help get this home up to beat. Some heavy lifting, parentheses, gain muscle, lunch is provided, United we thrive.
I love both the alliteration and the rock and roll references. That's very enticing. Anyone else want to share?
We can share ours. We're going to be focusing more on housing support. So Recovery Community Network is looking for a person in recovery that has experienced homelessness. This person is to help our applicants in search for housing. This position brings the experience of a volunteer to give back to our community experiencing homelessness. This lived experience provides support and connection to each participant.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing. I love how succinct these statements are, how they have the elements we're looking for, and in particular are just very clear to the volunteer. This is the thing you will be doing, and this is the impact it's going to have. At the end of the day, those are the two things that I look for most in this is, what do I need to do and how is it going to impact our community? So I would keep living with those statements and thinking about them as you think about the rest of the modules for this course. And how the statement can be refined to fit any of your volunteer opportunities or built upon. Now, there's one more layer I want to put onto this, and that is going back to our conversation about engaging marginalized communities and BIPOC communities, and that is utilizing inclusive language within our statements. And so ways that language could be more inclusive include, instead of our organization needs volunteers, consider, can you help your community? Instead of must speak English, consider English learners of all levels welcome. Or thinking about, again, what's important for your organization is, is fluent English an important part of the volunteer role or not? That's something you're going to have to decide for that specific role. Instead of meet people from around the world, consider connect with people in your community. Again, being community oriented is the more inclusive way to talk about your positions. And even more specifically, what kind of community they're going to be connecting with is part of that as well. There's some great language in the handouts with some before and after position descriptions that have been refined to include some more inclusive language. So feel free to refer to that as well. Any thoughts on inclusive language you'd like to add? All right. Concept 4 is, it is important to have effective trained people to recruit your new volunteers. So here's how I would frame this. It's important to have a really, really good message. It can sometimes be even more important to have the right person delivering that message. And I think back to my disenfranchised director who was not a fan of volunteers. That was not probably my best volunteer recruiter in the organization. If I had put that role on him, I have a feeling we never would have gotten volunteers, because how that message would have been portrayed would have not have been as thoughtful and inclusive as I would have liked. So we need to decide who it is that's going to be recruiting new volunteers. And how we determine that starts pretty basically. Your best recruiters are satisfied in their work. They are enthusiastic about the work. They are articulate, or at least are able to articulate your work. And they're connected, because those relationships that they're going to be drawing upon is going to be one of the key pieces of that. Satisfied is a funny one. And I think it's really, really important to understand that the happier somebody is with the work that they're doing, the more they're going to be able to portray that happiness through the language that they use. And people are going to catch on to that, wow, the Duluth Children's Museum is such a fun organization to work for. And, we love working with kids and we love supporting families. That comes across when you really believe all of that. Bye, Caddy. It was great to meet you. But beyond that, remembering that the personal ask is going to be the most effective way. We talked about at the very forefront of this, that having a recruiter who is connected in the communities that you're trying to draw from. And you can have a team of recruiters, or your recruiter could be a volunteer themselves. One of my best volunteer experiences I've had at the Children's Museum was early on, recruited a friend of mine who was well-versed in the nonprofit community to be a volunteer manager for us. She literally volunteered her time to manage volunteers and was totally bought into our mission, and became one of the best recruiters I could possibly ask for, and did that without anything but the benefit of building a skill set and doing something fun for the organization. And because it was a personal ask from me, and I had that relationship to do that. So as you're thinking about who your best recruiters are, caveat to that is, I understand, having taught this course for a while, that you probably are the recruiter for those positions. And so some of this might be too, how are you coming across in these conversations? And are you excited about your work and satisfied about your work? And if those things aren't true, we may have to ask some questions about, okay, are there some people who can help us? Because I realize that often the world of recruitment falls on a single set of shoulders. And you might just be that person who needs to figure out how to best navigate, how to get those key components in there. Enthusiasm comes from an IASM, and that is I am sold myself, to sum up some of those thoughts. Thoughts on that and who your best recruiter might be? Do you have somebody in mind now that you hadn't thought of before?
Here at USAR, a lot of our staff started as volunteers, so that can kind of be a success story of people that are saying, I thrived in my recovery and got really involved in this organization, and now I'm here. But I see that there could be an issue of volunteers wanting to have a paid position shortly after they start, but just using their experience can help maybe recruit some volunteers.
That's great, Teresa. I mean, nobody has sold themselves more than a client who has successfully gone through a program and, you know, drank the Kool-Aid per se, you know, believes truly that, hey, this worked for me and I want to support the organization as best I can by recruiting others. Absolutely.
That's how I ended up getting the position that I have now. I'm the volunteer coordinator, and you know, I started during COVID whenever I was going crazy being at my parents' house, and I had just started going into drug court, and I was trying to do all these extra things to balance my life and figure out, you know, where I could fit in at. And so this organization was started blooming around COVID. You know, we had a lot of people that were needing to go to meetings and that wanted to get outside of their head and just do something, anything but just stay inside. And so we were really blessed with everything kind of, you know, the way it happened. It's a godsend. It really is. And so I love that, being able to have that experience though, of that's how I got started, was, you know, volunteering myself. And then I fell in love with everything about it, everything. And so getting other volunteers to help that as well. We have a lot of volunteers that are already in the program or trying to come to the program and just, you know, taking steps to recovery themselves. And so that's a huge part of that, is the volunteering and realizing that them helping someone else in turn helps themselves so much. So yeah, I think it's a blessing. It's absolutely a blessing.
And again, I hear that in your voice. You are sold yourself, which means you are the right person. I'm ready to volunteer for you because the passion is right there. And, you know, it makes such a huge difference to be invested like you are in the organization. So thank you. Yeah, there's nothing like giving your time for free to something to really gain either a like or a dislike for something passionately. And hopefully in your work, you are building that good, positive passion. So once you've identified who that person is, who's going to be your recruiter, you need to set them up for success by giving them the tools that they need in order to be able to do that. And that kind of a toolkit involves having those statements of need and those recruitment messages, having position descriptions ready to go so that they know exactly what they're recruiting for. And then generating ideas with staff and volunteers and other folks that are stakeholders in your organization about where best to recruit people from, and how best to leverage our networks in order to be able to make those asks. And two questions you want to ask are, who knows about my organization and who supports it? Because that's the starting place for where those folks might be. A third question then, and I keep harping this over and over again, is then who has a relationship within those groups so that that ask comes as a personal ask, so that it's the right person making that ask at the right time. And again, as reminders, you know, be enthusiastic and upbeat. Try to keep that message as accurate and lighthearted as possible, with the idea that you're trying to convince somebody to do something for free for your organization. And so you want to make that as appealing as possible. But again, being really, really truthful and setting expectations correctly from the very beginning. And don't minimize the work. You know, you are the right person for this work at this time, and we couldn't do this without you, is the best kind of message you can send to somebody, so that they know, I really, really need you to be there. Laura, what's your question?
What would be sort of like the minimum hours per week that you would suggest that somebody would spend as like the recruitment manager? Like, is that best served as a full-time position? I mean, obviously depending on the size of the organization, but
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, my gut answer is it varies wildly depending on what your organization structure is like. But more specifically, I mean, I'd say, you know, each position needs to have a period of time spent with all of the aspects that we're talking about in all of these modules. So it's going to take, some time to develop a position description. It's going to take some time to develop a recruitment message, and then it's going to take some time to go out and make those asks. So, it's hard for me to quantify because it really depends. We don't have a volunteer management position in our organization, so our education director and myself share that role. And when we were readily utilizing volunteers, each of us was spending a couple hours a week. But we don't have a ton of volunteer positions in our organization. So if that's any kind of, I don't know, kind of the bare minimum, like that's what we needed to do. And again, it's part of it too depends on how many of these systems you're building from scratch right now. There's a lot more work to do on the forefront than there is once you have a really good recruitment toolkit that you're ready to go out there and use. Then it's as long as it takes to have conversations with people in your community. And that might just be a couple hours a week that are necessary. But you're going to have all those tools ready to go so that person is set up for success. Does that help, Laura? I'm sorry, it's still pretty vague, I'm sure, but.
No, that's helpful. Thank you.
And other questions about finding the right volunteers, finding the right recruiters? I started digging into this next slide before I moved to it, so I'm just going to leave that up for a second here. This is a good statement to remember. Responsible work attracts responsible people. Again, the more time we invest in a firm foundation, the more that foundation is going to support that volunteer role and make your life a lot easier. So I love this module because I'm a big fan of marketing, and I like the, that heartstring pulling thing, but the recruitment piece is absolutely not the important part of preparing for volunteers. The HR role part of it, the setting up yourself for success, that has to happen before you recruit. Otherwise, the whole tower of cards is going to crumble underneath it. So, so hopefully you've gotten yourself to a point where you're ready for people to come on. All right, well, I think we'll move into our last activity for the day. And that's where I'd love for you to kind of encapsulate this with some thoughts on what's a recruitment method that's worked well for you in the past, or that you've thought of through this presentation, or some creative idea that's been rolling around in your head. I'm going to split you into groups again one last time here, and I'd love just some 5 minutes of discussion around what, through the culmination of all the things we've talked about, what does a recruitment method look like, and how do you plan on executing this? And I'd love some creative ideas for how to make this happen. So we'll split you into groups for about 5 minutes here. Are they doing the evaluation, Wendy? Should I be mentioning that at the end? Okay, I didn't think so.
I just came back early because our group didn't really, there was only 2 of us that
That's okay,
participated.
Deborah. Totally okay. It can get awkward when you're just sitting in there staring at each other.
Yeah, especially when you're trying to look into the camera and make eye contact, but everybody's just kind of looking like, who are you? So.
Well, welcome back again, everybody. I would love to hear a nugget or two from those conversations. Did anything stand out? Any creative ideas come up?
Our group had 3 thoughts. I think the most significant one was to be able to assign a title or an identity to an individual. For example, Mike said, somebody who's always been in addiction, now to be a coordinator is important. And of course, having food at the table, bring in volunteers and give them a certificate for having completed a program. So those are 3 things that we came up with.
Those are phenomenal. It'll be interesting to transition back into communal food world post-pandemic here. I've got my first in-person board meeting tomorrow, and I'm bringing prepackaged snacks as a starting point for that. So I can't wait until we can have nice family meals, you know, with the people that we're working with, because people really appreciate that. Thank you, Cynthia. Other thoughts? All right. Well, that then leads us to our last concept, which is to say there are a lot of resources for all the modules you'll be learning in this training, but there are lots of recruitment opportunity resources out there. In your handouts, page 9, there's some suggested reading. In particular, I suggest the Thomas McKee article or the video that he shot about using dating theory as part of volunteer recruitment. The idea that, you know, how we relate with other people is really important to how we recruit volunteers. And he has a really fun way of talking about that. There are some thoughts from Minnesota colleagues that MAVA has gathered together. That's in your attachment A. Attachment B talks a bit about volunteer centers and their role in recruitment. If your community has a volunteer center, that's a great place to continue to have these conversations and to generate ideas with your colleagues, but also often have like a volunteer job board where you can post these kinds of positions. It's a great place to refine that statement, that recruitment statement, you know, post it in there, see how it resonates. If it's not gaining traction, you might need to do a little revision on it so that it pulls on those heartstrings. So that's a great place to be able to practice that. There is a sample press release as well in your handouts. That is a great tool, especially if you are doing something new with volunteer recruitment. That's what the media is really looking for, is a, you know, what new is going on at this organization that we might be able to build a story around. Although there are lots of newspapers that have a, volunteer positions this week section or a community section where a short paragraph might be able to be featured as well. So knowing too that most of what newspapers are these days has moved online, which is a great opportunity for you because the newspaper posts it, you throw the link onto social media, and it becomes a recurring cycle of good marketing for you and your organization. So any way that you can get the word out there that you have positions available, that's going to benefit your organization and make this all a lot easier for you. All of that being said, are there any final questions or thoughts that folks have? We've got 10 minutes here, and I'd love to answer any questions that you have boiling in your minds.
Yeah.
What was the biggest nugget you got out of today?
I like the examples you have in the back, the volunteer recruitment messages. And the sample press release. For a visual learner, it really does help me put something together instead of trying to create it all in my own head. Doesn't work well that way.
Great. Yeah, Mava puts together a lot of really useful tools, and I find those helpful too to draw upon when I'm looking for just a template so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel for all of these things,
For me, I think it's focusing on finding that internal motivation in volunteers, because I also do hiring for our paid positions, and it's kind of like, you're getting paid, so that's part of the internal motivation. But that if you really want to sustain a volunteer, they've got to kind of buy into it and feel like they're being rewarded since they're not getting a paycheck at the end of the day.
Awesome. Yes. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of similarities about how we motivate people across the organization, regardless of what kind of role they have. But yeah, you make a good point. Money is a motivator in and of itself. So what other ways can we make sure volunteers feel that?
Food.
Yes.
Big one. Everybody loves food.
People love food. I love food.
Cameron, I know you had mentioned when you went to the Duluth Children's Museum, there was some work to be done in the area of volunteer management. And a lot of the RCOs, even on this call, are, I would say established. And so I would feel like a lot of folks are in the area of having to kind of maybe undo and then redo. I was wondering if you could just spend a couple minutes talking to us about maybe some tips, tricks, red flags, anything to watch out for in that process.
Yeah, I love that question, Chris. So I'll tell you, I got when you're a new CEO, you have the best tool handed to you, which is cleaning house. I'm sorry to say. And when I got there, the biggest red flag was a bunch of unhappy staff people. Before I had accepted the position, I did a secret shopper. And I borrowed a friend's young child and brought them in and didn't let anybody know that I was a candidate for the position. And the sour faces among frontline staff was a dead giveaway to me that, boy, something different needed to happen here. And I had to do some soul searching right then of like, am I prepared to walk into this kind of people being upset. So, the first thing you're going to have to do is build enthusiasm for the work in your organizations and make sure that people are feeling really positive because, we talked about that revolving door of volunteers. Somebody's walking into your organization and it doesn't feel happy and it doesn't feel like a place where they're going to be treated like family. Because that's what volunteers often want, is just to be a part of a community. If you're not giving them that, then right there, you've already put yourself at a disadvantage. So, you're going to have to work on your staff first, probably, and some of your own thoughts about volunteers before you're going to be ready to bring in a group of volunteers. Beyond that, it was a lot of the nuts and bolts. And, I was fortunate to come in with a lot of this MAVA training under my belt. So building systems was not something that I felt uncomfortable with. It just, I had to kind of look at how we were working with volunteers originally and start bringing in some best practices and changing up some systems, and bringing any new staff that I was bringing on board from the very beginning, that volunteers are a part of our work now. So you need to be ready and engaged, and, here's how we do that. And I'm a very collaborative leader. So that meant, designing systems that were going to work for everybody and coming up with these processes together as a staff group, which again, also fed into making happier employees because they felt like they had a say in how all these things were going to go down. And yeah, so, we've brought in some really cool volunteers, and we've shifted a lot of our work. And our number one volunteer position at the Children's Museum right now is just hanging out on the floor with kids. Like there's nothing real formal about it. It's just being another adult out there, and slowly kind of saying, okay, would you like to try running a program? Would you like to try reading a story? And that allows people to build a skill set working with kids, but also, we're not looking for anybody who has a specific skill set. We're just looking for people who are fun to be around is the number one, and like to work with kids. And we, through that, have had a conduit, not directly into staff positions, but into our AmeriCorps program, is where we often will then kind of bump them up into, and then we end up hiring our AmeriCorps members almost 100% of the time. So we do sort of have an upward trajectory for folks. It's just not a specific from volunteer to staff person. But we're lucky to have those resources. I mean, that's, for being a small organization, we definitely have some cool things going on. Well, with that, I feel like releasing you into the wild a little bit early here. I guess I'll turn it back over to Chris for any last notes, and we'll go from there.
Thanks, Cameron. This was awesome. What a great session. I think volunteer recruitment strategies are, again, at the core of, a core area that recovery community organizations can focus on. And we can never be too good at it. So we'll always learn, grow, and evolve. Thank you, Wendy, for putting in a note about the MAVA's virtual volunteer engagement leadership conference coming up in June. Looks like there's some coupon codes there. And then just a reminder that monthly we will have our Ask the Expert session. So it's an open time to come in. We're on the call for, I think it's an hour and a half, and it's Wendy and some other members of her team, where you can ask these questions and get a little bit more detail. So if something, piqued your interest in one of the sessions we've had so far, and you said, think I really want to work on this strategy and I want some feedback, you can join the call. The next one is on Wednesday, May 26th. And that is from, let's see, I think it's, I didn't write down the time, but we will send out a reminder prior to the session so that if you want to join the call and run through any strategies that you're working on, feel free to join that call. Otherwise, that's all I have for y'all. So we have 2 minutes left back in your day. Thank you. We'll see you next month or at the Ask the Expert session.